suppliers.
Yeah.
So major markets have made decisions to not source beef and poultry that are antibiotics. And one chain announced that they were no longer going to use GMO foods. The GMO foods is a separate issue, but with regard to antibiotics, can you talk a little bit about why that's so important?
Yeah, it is very important. So Tyson, which is the biggest producer of chicken, pledged last week or this week that they were phasing out what are called, they're low levels of antibiotics used for growth promotion. There are three reasons you would use antibiotics in meat production. One is because, for reasons we don't totally understand, these low levels of antibiotics increase the growth rate, so you can get your chicken to weigh faster. They also use them, though, to prevent disease in a prophylactic way, because these animals are living in disease-causing conditions. I mean, under great stress and filth. The brutality of animal agriculture makes antibiotics necessary to keep the animals from getting sick. And lastly, to use them to actually cure an outbreak of disease, which is completely defensible use. So there's been a lot of pressure to get antibiotics out of meat production because it wasn't initially because consuming these low levels of antibiotics was a problem for us, although I'll get to the fact that it may turn out to be. But basically because you were creating these antibiotic-resistant microbes. And we have very few antibiotics left, and we have the development of some microbes like MRSA and several others that are not responding to antibiotics. And some of these microbes are being generated in hospitals where we overuse antibiotics also, but a lot of them are coming off of our factory farms, and they've been very well documented, coming off of pig farms, especially in the Midwest, where there's a lot of MRSA. And so it's a clear threat to public health. And we've known this for 30 years. And remarkably, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, has done very little about it over the years, nothing until very recently. They were under court order in 2012 to address this problem. And they were told that this decision, a voluntary program would be a dereliction of their duty. And what do they come forward with a year later? A voluntary program. And so this has been the Obama administration's contribution to this. Is a voluntary program saying they will no longer use them for growth promotion. They can still use them for prevention and treatment. And what you're going to have, I fear, is vets or who work for these feedlots, or the feedlots themselves simply declaring, well, we're now using them to prevent disease. When they did the same thing in the Netherlands, they said no more growth promotion. Antibiotic sales never dipped. So they just changed the name of what they were doing. And I fear that's going to happen here. I think we need tougher regulations. But in the meantime, corporations are stepping forward, responding to consumers. And, we've come to a point in this country where the government can get very little done. And we now depend on petitioning corporations to take care of our problems. It's great when they act, but it's not the way it should work. And one of my concerns about it is that in the case of McDonald's, who made this very showy pledge 2 weeks ago, no more antibiotics in our chicken. If you go back, you will see in 2003 they made the same pledge. So why did they have to do it again? Because they didn't fulfill the first one. So we have to be very vigilant. This is really happening. I think the industry wants to get away from it. I think, but it's hard to do without reducing the stress on these animals and slowing down the process a little bit. But that's exactly what we need to do. So I'm encouraged. I think the industry is feeling the heat of the food movement and the various public health activists who've been pushing this issue. Now, I alluded to this other problem, which is there's been some research recently suggesting that we are getting low levels of antibiotic residues in our meat and possibly in other foods and in cosmetics. And we're putting antimicrobials in everything these days. Triclosan is in a great many household products and cosmetic products. But there's research suggesting that in the same way low levels of antibiotics make animals fat, they may be contributing to our obesity problems. And there's serious research suggesting that it may be an important factor in the obesity epidemic, which coincides with this, widespread use of antibiotics. And through the mechanism probably altering the gut microbiome in ways that favor species that help you put on weight. So that's another reason to avoid it. And I would think it's another reason to eat organic, where you're not allowed to use antibiotics in meat production. However, a public health expert at Berkeley recently told me that he doesn't eat organic produce because it's often fertilized with feedlot manure that's full of antibiotics and hormones. I don't know if he's right or not. I don't know that the organic produce has been tested and found to have these residues. In general, organic food has very few residues of pesticides, but I don't